Blake Lively's legal team just got confronted outside court, and honestly, the whole thing was so uncomfortable to watch, and I was living for every second of it. Our girl Else, she walked right up to Cigarette and Ezra Blake's actual attorneys, just casually standing outside the courthouse, and she did not hold back. And before I get into all of this, massive shout out to Ellswitchrich, because this is her footage, her courage, her work. Go subscribe to her channel right now. She's been an incredible part of everything we've been covering here, and she genuinely deserves all the love. So the moment happens, and Ellswitchrich just approaches them, and I want you to picture this. Cigarette and Ezra are walking out. They're in their lawyer outfits. They look polished. They look confident. They think they're just going to do a quick press moment and head out. And then Ellswitchrich is right there. She calls out to them by name. Ezra's reaction was honestly hilarious because you could just tell from his entire body language that he knew exactly who she was. He knew this wasn't going to be a soft, friendly interview. He immediately started looking for an escape. Classic. And that's actually what ended up happening. Ezra literally just slipped away and left Cigarette to handle the whole thing. Which, fair enough. That's kind of her job, to speak to press. But still, the way he just disappeared was so telling. Now, Ellswitchrich, to her credit, was completely respectful. She was warm. She was kind. She complimented them. And that's smart, because if you come in aggressive, they'll just dismiss you. But she came in friendly, so they had no reason to just walk away immediately. She even managed to stand there alongside a TMZ reporter who was also trying to get quotes from Cigarette. And side note, whoever that TMZ reporter is, she is always there. Always. She is doing the work, and someone needs to tag her because she deserves her recognition too. So Cigarette starts giving the standard attorney responses. She's talking about how this is about lifting up the law, protecting employees from sexual harassment in the workplace. It's about the principle. Blake is strong. She's going to continue living her life. All very PR approved, all very rehearsed. And Ellswitchrich is standing right there, nodding and listening and waiting. And then she asks the real question, the question that everyone watching has been sitting with. She basically says, "We all heard you and Blake say she wanted her day in court. She wanted to actually stand there and be heard. What changed? Was it the Met Gala? Did she need to make it to the Met Gala that badly?" And I need you to understand how significant it is that she said that out loud directly to Blake's attorney standing outside the courthouse, with other press right there. That was bold. That was actually bold. Cigarette's response was everything you'd expect from a lawyer who suddenly realizes she's in deeper territory than she planned for. She started talking about damages and how the court is going to handle the process and how this is about being heard in a different way. She did not answer the question at all. Ellswitchrich pushed again and asked about the 47.1 damages. Whether that was really enough for Blake, considering everything Blake said she was fighting for. And Cigarette kind of just wrapped it up with something about advocacy and how Blake is going to be doing great advocacy work in the future. And then she was trying to leave. Trying being the key word, because right at that moment, the whole situation turns, and it gets way more interesting. There's a group of women nearby who are there in support of Blake, and one of them introduces herself as the legal director at Sanctuary for Families. And at first glance, it seems like just another backer showing up to the courthouse. But here's where it gets complicated. Sanctuary for Families, along with 13 other organizations, filed an actual amicus brief in support of Blake Lively. These aren't just random people holding signs. They went to actual legal measures to back her case. So Ellswitchrich, being Ellswitchrich, decided to engage them. And what happened next was one of the most unintentionally revealing conversations I have seen come out of this entire case. The woman from Sanctuary for Families starts explaining why they're there. She talks about DARVO, which stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse, Victim, and Offender. She talks about how survivors are being silenced through defamation cases and how they need legislation in New York, similar to California's laws. And honestly, in a vacuum, that is a real issue worth talking about. That is a legitimate cause. But Ellswitchrich gently starts asking her to apply that specifically to this case. And this is where it starts falling apart. Ellswitchrich asks her directly, "Can you tell me one instance of sexual harassment that happened in this case?" And the woman starts going into how Justin admitted to being a drug addict. And Ellswitchrich immediately catches that and says, "Wait, he told you that?" And the woman says, "Well, that's what he told Blake." And Ellswichrich's response is exactly right. Were you there for that? Because right now we are talking about what Blake claims happened and what Justin says did not happen. And the moment the woman says, "I believe survivors," the whole conversation just cracked open, because saying, "I believe survivors" in this context is essentially saying, "I believe Blake," because she is a woman. Not because the evidence supports it, not because the claims held up, but because she's a woman and she said it. And meanwhile, Judge Lyman already dismissed 10 of the 12 claims, including all of the sexual harassment claims. That detail apparently did not make it into this woman's research. And this is the part that genuinely bothered me, because Sanctuary for Families is a real organization doing real work for real survivors. And I am not here to criticize them as a whole. But when you file an amicus brief in a case and then cannot name a single specific instance of what you are defending, that is a problem. That is a credibility problem. And Ellswitch was not being aggressive about it. She was genuinely asking, "Give me one example. Just one. Walk me through it." And the woman kept avoiding. At one point, she says, "Well, there was a birthing scene where Blake was pressured to film naked, and the entire crowd around them just kind of reacted because that is not what happened. Blake was not naked in that scene." Adam Munchin, who was actually on set, they're actually holding the baby in that scene, came out publicly and said nothing of that sort took place. He described exactly what happened, and it was nothing close to what was being described outside that courthouse. And here is this legal director, someone who filed an actual court document in this case, repeating something that has already been publicly challenged by someone who was physically present. Ellswitchrich pushed back immediately. She asked, "Have you seen the movie?" And the woman said, "Yes." And Ellswitchrich said, "Okay, so then you know she was not naked." And the woman starts trying to reframe what naked means in that context. And it just becomes this whole thing where you can feel everyone around them trying not to react. It was genuinely painful to watch in the best possible way. Because this is the thing, if you are going to put your organization's name on a legal document supporting someone's case, you need to be able to defend the basics. You need to be able to say, here's what happened and here's why it qualifies. And she could not do that. Then Ellswitchrich says something that I think is the most important moment of that whole exchange. She says, "I am actually here for the survivor, which is Justin Baldoni, for malicious prosecution." And the woman from Sanctuary for Families literally says she is shaking. And I get it. That is a jarring thing to hear if you walked in believing one version of this story completely. But that reaction also tells you a lot about how little she looked into the other side of the evidence before showing up and filing legal documents. And then another woman in the group tries to step in and kind of pull things back. She basically tries to shut the conversation down. She tells Ellswitchrich they do not want to have this discussion because of her level of aggression. And I want to be very clear here because I watched this footage closely. Ellswitchrich was not aggressive. She was firm. She was direct. She was asking specific questions and not accepting vague responses. That is not aggression. That is accountability. And calling it aggression when someone simply will not let you dodge a question is a distraction tactic that I personally cannot stand. The woman from Sanctuary for Families also turned to Ellswitchrich at one point and asked her if she had even read the facts of the case. And I actually laughed out loud at that because Ellswitchrich is one of a small group of people alongside Lauren and Zach and Donna and a handful of others who have been in this case from the start. She has read the documents. She has watched the hearings. She has been there in person. She has done interviews with people connected to the case. She probably knows more about the specific facts of this legal situation than most people who showed up to that courthouse that day, including some of the people who filed legal documents in it. And the thing that keeps sticking with me is the amicus brief angle, because these organizations did not just show up with signs, they went through an actual legal process to attach their names to Blake's case. 13 organizations, and at least one of them standing right there on camera, could not name a single verified instance of what they were defending, could not explain the sexual harassment claims that have since been dismissed, could not engage with the opposing evidence that is publicly available. What does that say about the due diligence that went into those briefs? I am not saying these organizations are bad organizations. I am saying that backing a case without fully grasping it does not help survivors. It actually does the opposite. And this brings me to something that I think is genuinely significant and that not enough people are talking about loudly enough. The creator of California's Civil Code, 47.1, the actual professor who created the law that Blake's team has been leaning on as the backbone of her case, has now publicly come out and said she does not support the way this case is using her law. She has said it feels like a publicity act. She has distanced herself from it. The person who built the legal foundation that Blake's side has been standing on has walked away from it. And organizations are still filing amicus briefs in her name without apparently knowing that. That is the detail that changes the entire conversation. Because if you are a Sanctuary for Families, and you are showing up to defend a case built around 47.1, and the creator of 47.1 is now publicly opposing how it is being used here, your position has a serious problem. And the answer is not to get upset when someone points that out. The answer is to go back and do the research and figure out whether the person you are defending actually stands for what you say you stand for. Because here's the thing about this whole situation that really gets me. The cause that Sanctuary for Families says they are there for is genuinely important. Protecting survivors from being silenced through defamation cases, pushing for stronger legislation, making sure people who come forward do not get crushed for it. That matters. That is real work that real people need. And that is exactly why attaching that cause to a case where the sexual harassment claims have already been dismissed by a judge is so harmful. Because now when people see that organization's name, they are not thinking about the important work they do. They're thinking about that conversation outside the courthouse where their legal director could not name one specific incident from the case they filed documents in. And Sigrid, Blake's attorney, she did not come out of this looking great either, because the whole point of talking to press outside a courthouse is to control the narrative. You go out there, you say your prepared lines, you reinforce your client's image, and you walk away looking composed. And Sigrid was doing exactly that until Ellswitchrich asked about the Met Gala. That one question completely broke the flow of the whole press moment. Because it is the question that gets to the heart of what a lot of people watching this case have been feeling. Blake spent so much time publicly saying she wanted her day in court. Her team made a point of emphasizing that she wanted to be heard, and then the case settled before trial, and shortly after she showed up at the Met Gala, looking completely unbothered. Now, I am not saying the timing proves anything definitive. Settlements happen for all kinds of reasons. Legal strategy, cost, risk assessment. 100 different factors go into that decision. But the optics of it, combined with the fact that 10 out of 12 claims, including all the sexual harassment claims, were dismissed before it even got to trial, makes it really hard to look at this as the triumphant survivor story that Blake's team has been presenting it as. And Sigrid standing outside that courthouse talking about advocacy and lifting up the law while not being able to answer whether the settlement was actually enough for her client. That distance between the messaging and the reality is exactly what Ellswitchrich exposed just by asking a straightforward question. I also want to come back to Ezra for a second, because his decision to just leave when he saw Ellswitch approaching tells you a lot. These attorneys know who she is. They know she is not going to ask softballs. They know she has done the work. And Ezra made the very deliberate decision that he did not want to be on camera with her, which honestly might have been the smarter move compared to what ended up happening with the Sanctuary for Families exchange. But it also means that the lead attorney on one of the most talked about Hollywood legal cases of the past couple of years quietly slipped away rather than answer questions from someone with a YouTube channel. And I think that says more than any prepared comment could. What this whole day showed me is that the people who have been paying close attention to this case, actually reading the documents, actually watching the hearings, actually engaging with both sides of the evidence, are operating on a completely different plane than some of the people who showed up to that courthouse to be visible. And visibility without substance is fine for a photo op, but it falls apart the second someone asks you a direct question. Ellswitchrich asked direct questions, and the answers, or more accurately, the non-answers, told the whole tale. Now going forward, what I really want to see is whether any of those 13 organizations that filed amicus briefs are going to reconsider their position now that so much has changed. The sexual harassment claims are dismissed. The builder of 47.1 has publicly walked back her support. The case settled before Blake ever had to take the stand. If these organizations genuinely stand for survivors and genuinely stand for the integrity of the laws they are invoking, they owe it to their own cause to look at this again. And if they still stand by it after looking at all of that, I want to hear the reasoning. I want someone to sit down and explain it, because based on what I saw outside that courthouse, nobody has been able to do that yet. We are going to be following up on all of this. We are going to be examining every single organization that put their name on those briefs, and we are going to see who is still standing behind Blake Lively now that the landscape has shifted this dramatically, because this is not over.